Give it another minute or two for stragglers to arrive, but I think the bulk of people that had RSVP'd for tonight are in. So we're just going to be doing a general chit chat and Q&A tonight. So if anybody's got anything they want answered or looked into, put it in the chat, and we'll come back through on that soon. In the email that I sent out an hour and a bit ago, there was a few other random questions that partially Nathan, Stuart and I had been going through and typing in.
Good evening.
It was your question, Nathan, that was more out of frustration, the recapture one.
Yeah, yeah, I've had to ditch it actually. So a website I look after, Australian Book Review, it has these competitions for poetry prize and short story prizes.
Yep.
It's like 10, 15 grand prize for the winner kind of thing. So I've got these entry forms in a payment form. People can fill out the form and basically upload their poem or story as a PDF or Word doc or whatever and pay their fee and away they go. And they're using the e-way payment gateway. For some reason, I think in hindsight, it was actually just getting targeted a particular page, but the gift subscription page was getting hit by fraudulent transactions. Someone testing basically stolen credit card numbers at a very rapid rate, and e-way are real good in that they hit you up for every transaction, regardless of whether it's fraudulent or successful or not. Unlike Stripe, actually, as it turns out, but e-way are quite a bit cheaper than Stripe. Anyway, so e-way suspended their account. They had all this grief, so went through with Tuan, the developer of Payment Form. They also make Membership Pro and events booking, and had him add all these extra spam features to the form. So you can specify a minimum amount of time to fill out the form and a maximum amount of time. You can specify a maximum number of sessions. And he was pretty happy with that and rolled it out to all the other components. Sadly, it didn't stop our form from getting hacked. So like it was fine for about a week, and then all of a sudden, bang, it's come back. So I upgraded to reCAPTCHA 3, the invisible reCAPTCHA, which seemed to be going fine, except we started getting reports of people getting a timeout or duplicate error message at the top of the form, just appearing in the Joomla error message sort of dialogue. And as it turns out, this is a error with reCAPTCHA in that there is a freaking 2-minute timeout on the reCAPTCHA token. So if the form takes longer than 2 minutes to fill out, or the person happens to make a cup of tea while they're filling it out, or answer the phone or do something like that, there's a fair chance they're going to get this useless error message that doesn't help them at all. And there are apparently ways that you can extend the session timeout by resetting the JavaScript token, but yeah, there wasn't much documentation that I could find around that. Interestingly, I don't think it happens with RS Form Pro's invisible reCAPTCHA plugin, just the Joomla core one. Because I've got that running on Sane's website with some quite lengthy forms and have not had any problems. So if anyone has any solutions, I'm all ears. In the end, we had to turn it off and go back to reCAPTCHA 2, and we just took the gift subscription page down for a while.
I reckon that if it's the core one that's doing it and not the RS Forms one, then once we find how to reset the timeout, a pull request would fix it going forward, but that's not going to... We've got to work out what it's doing first. So
did actually Google it this afternoon, and I think there's something in GitHub about that error. I'm not sure I didn't.
Right.
That was as far as I got. I got distracted by something else, and I was like, so I think it might. Yeah, well, certainly when I Googled the whole timeout or duplicate thing, it's definitely an issue.
Yeah.
But there are ways around it where you can specify the timeout as long as you're writing your own function.
Yeah.
But there's no, obvious option in the Joomla core plugin to specify the timeout period. That would probably be the best option. Anyway, that's been driving me mad for about 2 weeks.
So
nothing like not having it CC me with every entry over the weekend and keeping an eye on it to make sure it's not getting slammed again.
Yeah, there's 5 recapture issues, and there's been 123 closed issues with it in the Joomla CMS at the moment. So, but I can't see the timeout specifically there at the second. But that one, I've written down a note there. So yeah, it's.
But you'll get that fixed for me, will you, Patrick?
Well, look into it more. Might not be.
There's a yeah.
Let's put that in there. If you can find the
there's this. Hang on. It's from 2020.
Right. Okay. So that got closed at the time by the looks of it. So
not considered an issue apparently.
no, you have to go back through and read and see.
Oh yes, yeah. Maybe it's just me not seeing the need for a fix here.
Okay. Yeah, and tell me who said that, and I'll tell you. Yeah.
Vedic?
Right. Yeah. So,
oh no, sorry, that was Richard 67.
Yeah. No. So Richard's one of the maintainers. So quite often when Richard spots something and doesn't quite get it, then he's got the power to close it, and so then if it doesn't close or doesn't have a resolution come through.
Right, so it looks like it was just closed without really anything happening. Anyway, it's a thing.
Yeah, well, and then it didn't. Yeah, so it sat there from September 2020 through to February this year, and so then wasn't looked at further. But that means that we can go back and that's the type of thing. So I use RS Forms one mainly as well because it's going to be on RS Forms all the time. But the Joomla core one is quite handy to configure as the option because then you have to configure it for that, and then it's OS membership and logins and shopping
everything
carts.
else. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So certainly would go and have a look at that and see it more. So
I've been hassling to Anne about it as well, so I might ask his nuts about it too.
Yeah, and point out that 30644 because when it gets closed because of inactivity, that's more that the conversation went dead and no one stepped up to fix the problem. So the fact that it's Koi that closed it, it also means it's a bit weird. So yeah.
I might also just have a look at the RS Form Pro one and see if there's an obvious difference.
Yeah, and then the other, I googled reCAPTCHA 3 timeout, and there's a Stack Overflow that's come up.
I found a few of those.
Yeah, but it didn't there's no upvotes, so that means that nobody's found or tried the solution to.
You still might chat with his name on Slack the other day about it, and he said, "Oh, try this," and I said, "That's very similar looking to what I found here on Stack Overflow,"
Yeah.
and he was like, "Oh yeah, I got it from there."
Yeah, that's how it works. Cool. All
Anyway,
right. So I'm making notes during the course of the evening because the types of questions that you're asking are either a source of blog post for me or a source of other comment. So,
I see the Terminator from Brisbane's joined us. You're on mute, mate.
I'd say that's the best way.
It was as complimentary as I could come up with, Stuart.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move on to Greg's question about auto refreshing a Joomla page on a time basis. So, what do you want it to do, and how often do you want it to refresh, Greg? And you're on mute still.
I'll put it in context. It's a dynamic page that basically displays a classroom situation where you've got a number of different classes in different rooms. They call it the departure lounge page. It's so it's got what classes are on in every classroom and what's coming up next with the times that they're on. Now, I use it in a digital signage application using Zybo, and that works very well because you can put in your own times that each page will display, and it can move between them. But also developed a version of it that just runs on a web browser, and the only way I can currently see to do it is to use a meta tag, which to me means I've got to have a special template just for that page. But I was looking for another solution. I've seen the pages that some of you have provided. So the idea is that you bring up the page and it would refresh every minute.
Yep.
There's a solution there that I've seen before that talks about adding another module, but I'm not sure what that means in terms of.
So where that post was originally, so what have we got? Yeah, there was part of the discussion was 2008.
Yeah.
Added the following instructions in 2017. But I do a slight variation on that myself. So, so the meta refresh is the easiest. Like at the end of the day, that's what the code will be to trigger the refresh. That's how you get it to do it. Where you put that becomes the next question. So, I wouldn't be using the module manager. I would actually use Regular Labs re-replacer or Regular Labs I would use and then you can either make you make a rule that would replace the closing head tag with putting the meta refresh above the closing head tag, and that means that it would drop it in, and then you could assign that rule to whichever pages you wanted to refresh.
Okay, well that sounds promising. So that's regular.
Muted yourself, Greg. There.
Sorry, I had the spacebar option, but it wasn't working. So Regular Labs re-replacer.
Yeah, Regular Labs re-replacer.
Okay, I'll look at that. Thank you.
Yeah, and then replace head with...
Can I just ask, Greg, the information that you're displaying, do you want the whole page to reload, or do you just want the bits on the page that have changed to reload?
Ideally, the bits that have changed, but in effect, it's not that long a page, so it doesn't really matter. terms of efficiency. You're talking about Ajax, are you?
Well, that could be part of your solution. One,
Yeah.
if you just want certain bits of your page to change, then you can do something that like pushes data back to the screen. So I'm trying to think of something that does it, because what you're looking at has to happen at the browser, like at the client side, not so much the server side.
Correct. Yeah.
So even if you wanted to do the whole page, you could just do a simple bit of JavaScript for just that page that you wanted, that just ran every minute and issued a reload page. And you could just sit there and tell it what time you wanted to do it. But,
that link from Martin looks good, the JavaScript. Sorry, Terry. Martin just posted a link that sort of seems to do the JavaScript part of that. Is that right, Martin? Yep.
Well, that refers to using a cron job.
Yeah, use a cron to call, use a cron job every whatever to call your JavaScript, but you probably don't need to do that. There's you can use jQuery to do it as well. I mean, there are multiple, what's the phrase? Multiple ways to skin a cat. You can do this a heap of different ways. One is that Patrick's suggestion of using the meta tag to refresh it every whatever in time frame, or use a cron if you wanted to call a, you know, you can do it a heap of different ways. I think the re-replacer option's the easiest, but Terry's is probably more technically correct in the fact that if it's a bigger page, you really only want to change the data that's changed rather than reloading the page. But at the end of the day, it's probably quicker to just reload the whole bloody page.
Yeah.
Well, that's my conclusion.
If you were doing like live sports results or something like that from multiple different games, then you probably want to use Ajax to do that. But given that, you know, so.
The other question I've got is that, is it just like a kiosk type thing where there's one or two screens that are displaying this page that people are referring to, or are they sitting at home and everyone's got their own page on their mobile or whatever, and that's what you want to actually display, like, or sorry, what you want to refresh?
It's basically only one or two users in an office environment who would be using the page. It's not really intended for end users on multiple devices. So
yeah. So in that case, you're talking about something happening at the client side. Like anything with a cron is going to happen on the server, not on somebody's browser. So if you just put a very simple little bit of JavaScript in it, just that, like put it behind a button that only the people that need to see it or need to use it can click on it, and it'll just sit there and every minute just go off and reload the page. It's probably only a handful of lines of code, and it only works on the page that you want it to work on for the people you want to work for, rather than some of what I was saying. It's kind of everybody's going to get the same page refreshing all the time.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I think I've got enough ideas from that to take it further and hopefully solve it.
So I'm just putting another note there. The JavaScript method that Martin's last post there with Stack Overflow has, you could actually build that into a re-replacer rule with some regex, and then turn it into a little shortcut that you can put in the article. So then you can call it whenever you want it to be. You don't have to go back and adjust it every time. And so if you made a little rule that said replace, refresh, and whatever the regex is for finding the numbers, you could then have refresh 300, and then that would be able to be dropped into an article, and that would replace it with the set interval reload script that's in the Stack Overflow post. And then from there you could basically have it so that once you put that into the page, it would refresh in 300 seconds or whatever you've got as the timeout, if that makes sense.
Could you do that via a snippet?
You can do it by a snippet as well, but by using a re-replacer, it lets you pass the variable in on the fly. So,
Okay.
like you can pass, I think you can pass parameters into a snippet as well. So, and it might be a combination so that you don't have to tamper with the code all the time. That just replaces it with the snippet. So. Cool. And that's an interesting enough one that could be worth a Joomla magazine article out of it. So I'll add that to the ideas list. So.
I had someone ask me to do that on the forums once so that it was more like a live chat.
Right.
Pointed out to them it could be a little disconcerting if you're trying to make a post in that live chat and then the page refreshed on you.
Yes.
That's a bit like your recapture thing. You've got a second to fill out your forum post before it's already too late. Reload the page.
That's it, yes. Very much so.
Yeah, Stuart threw in disaster recovery as a topic. But I think that was more due to my past week's effort trying to recover a NAS drive that was hit with ransomware. The big tip there is if you know that the ransomware is running on something, just turn the device off to stop the encoding process.
Yeah.
If it's a particular type of attack. So, we managed to save something like 95% of all the data just by turning the device off, which was very lucky. So,
what sort of NAS was it?
And if you happen to have a QNAP NAS drive, make sure it's up to date.
I was at one of my clients many years ago where they had a nearly 200 gig SQL Server database and the backups were all held on the NAS drive. The ransomware was released. I was there on the day, as it turned out, and I literally ran down the stairs and powered off all their servers and every device in the place. It took 20 minutes from when we first noticed it to when I stopped it, and it encrypted the running SQL Server MDB files, the SQL Server operating system, the main application file server, and the NAS drive in that time. It was incredible how quick it actually migrated across the network, and it was fortunate we had enough backups offsite to get things back up and running again on a temporary basis and then get them fully functional. But I've had a few near misses with things like that. The ransomware ones are the worst, where they nicely print out a piece of paper on the company printer as well, saying please deposit your I kid you not, it came out of one of the printers on the network. So yeah, not good. But I think one of the things that I was working on over the last 2 or 3 weeks, I got delivered a server from a client which was not in good shape, and it had been neglected by the people who had been hosting this guy's website. He had 70,000 names in his ACY mailer mailing list and no backups. And the server operating system of CentOS was corrupt. So basically they delivered him the server and it was unfunctional. So I had to pull all my skills out of the bag to get the data recovered. And it was not easy, and it was pretty ugly, but managed to get it back up and running again. But I guess it sort of just highlights how data backups are so important, and not just backing up, but making sure you can restore from them. So how many people have done a test restore in the last 2 days of anything? Yeah. You can magically think you're saving stuff, and if it's not in good shape to restore from, then you're wasting your time anyway.
So one thing I do is I always run a separate copy of my site under dev dot, whatever the domain is. So I do it I do that in a subdomain on a cPanel account. And I'll run particularly major upgrades of software on that dev dot domain before I run on the live site. So as a consequence of that, I will regularly update the dev site with a backup. So hence I'm testing the restore process as part of updating the development side. So it's actually something I probably do weekly, I think, is testing that restore.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, you want them to work.
Yeah. And it's
AC mailing, actually. I had a bit of a nightmare trying to update one of my dev sites recently, which the same one I was talking about before, that was getting hit with the fraud payments, which has also a massive AC mailing database. Was trying to restore the backup to the dev site, and it got stuck on the stats tables in AC mailing. Come up with duplicate error on the stats tables, because essentially the backup had taken so long, because their site is like 7 GB, I think, because they basically published an archive of all their magazines digitally online going back to the 70s. But you know, basically it takes like 4 hours for the backup to run if it includes all the stats tables. So at the same time, AC mailing can actually be doing a mail out and trying to update the stats table. So you end up with duplicate records in the database. Yeah, also a lot of fun.
Yeah, the stats table was the winner in this particular case, because it was 1.76 gigs on
it. Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah.
Generates huge amounts of data, the stats table. So if you're running a large site with AC mailing, it's something you're aware of. So I turned around and said, look, sorry guys, we're going to have to exclude the stats table from the backup, because that's just not happening. You know? I could do the restore, I just had to set it to ignore errors and then go and empty the stats table. But it's still essentially a useless backup. I recommended they should export, or we should sort of archive stats annually. You know, or at least sort of extract what you need to from them, report on it to the board or whoever, and, you know, wipe it from the website.
Well, the stats table isn't critical to AC mailing.
No, not at all.
Right.
But if you were to completely have the site trashed and you went to restore it from backup, and then all of a sudden there were no stats tables or no AC mailing stats without the client being aware of that, they might be a bit pissed. So.
Is there a way with the Keeper backup to exclude certain folders?
Absolutely.
I've never looked at that.
Folders and database tables, and or contents. So you can exclude the contents of a database table as well, which is what I did in this case. Now, I did say to them, look, you know, let's do one backup of the entire thing, including the stats table, once per year, when we know you're not sending out a newsletter. You know, sometime over New Year, Christmas, when they're not doing anything, we'll just run a full backup so that they at least have it done annually.
Are you using the enterprise Akiva, Greg, or just the freebie one?
The pro version.
Yeah, think in the free one it's not available, excluding the lot more limited. But if you got the paid one, it's easy to do.
Well, I've got a lot of, I've got one folder with a whole lot of documents in it, that are PDFs mainly, that are sort of mostly static from one backup to another. So I don't really need it backed up every night. Yeah, I think the solution there is to do a less regular backup of that particular folder, which is sort of several gigabytes, and just do the dynamic stuff more frequently.
Has anyone used the incremental backup feature in a Kiva backup?
No.
Not in Akiva, because generally the databases are so small that we're dealing with by comparison.
Yeah, generally. I think the incremental is mostly about the files rather than the database. So,
I did it for a WordPress site. I've got a 70 gig WordPress site, which is primarily, it's a real estate site, so it's got lots of photos in. So that's what holds all the data. That's where the data is stored, or you know what I'm trying to say. And yeah, I tried to use incremental. It just took surprise, it took so long. And I was doing the backup to AWS because, 70 gigs.
So it's having to do a compare against what it's got on file and then check and scan. Yeah, it's just going to take forever.
It just wasn't worth doing. So I exclude the WP contents directory now.
Yes, I've got a couple of sites where it'd be useful if incremental actually just worked, but no, it doesn't.
Incremental also has a problem with when you restore it, that you've got to put them all back together in one order, and if one fails, then you really don't have much of a backup. So quick to do, but a nightmare to actually restore from.
Yes, it's a nice idea in theory.
Mm-hmm.
We had another interesting scenario, Britt and I, in the last couple of days, and that was doing a upgrade from Joomla 3.10 to Joomla 4. And what the scenario was, doing a Joomla 4 upgrade, run through the pre-upgrade checker, everything checked out. Got rid of all the things that didn't pass muster, and yet it still wouldn't upgrade, was giving all sorts of errors. And the reason was actually not to do with the upgrade per se, but somewhere along the line in 3.9 to 3.10, they added an index to the user table to disallow duplicate emails. And that was the cause of the problem. So when the 3.9 and plus upgrades were done, it happily went past that, but the database was out of whack. So when it came to Joomla 4, it said, I can't upgrade this database because I've got these errors, and the errors were actually from way back in version 3. And the way we found it was restore the version 3.9, went into the manage databases, and it was so obvious that that was the problem right there. Hit the fix button, everything, or actually eliminated all the duplicate entries, and used the fix button to then roll forward the upgrades of the SQL tables. But what I was surprised was that wasn't part of the pre-update check, that it checks to see that there's no errors in the fixed database area. I would have I assumed that would be part of the pre-update checking.
Well, you know that makes an ass out of you and me, doesn't it? So
Maybe you.
Is there a way around that? Because we've got many users who share their email address with their spouse, but they want separate user accounts.
No, basically,
No.
the rules are that you should have a unique email address anyway. But the fact that these were pre-existing this upgrade, what I had to do was basically I did a select query because there was 400 records that were affected. It was quite a large number of users. So I did a select query based on a group by having count greater than 2 of email and spat that list out, and then basically wrote an update query to update the email addresses with a 1 in the front just to make them unique. But essentially, there's no way to make the email not unique, if you like. It has to be unique for Joomla 4. So yeah, it was a bit of a funny one to find because the error on upgrade wasn't really that clear, was it, Britt?
No, it wasn't. It certainly got a novice like me.
Yeah.
So what's it not checking?
It basically didn't check to see if there were any, when you go into extensions.
Pre-checker.
Yeah. So
The pre-checker didn't check that there were no database errors pre-existing in the system.
right.
Which it obviously knows that they're there in version 3 anyway, so it should know them that should be something that should get picked up. So as a matter of course, for any future upgrades, we will be checking that is clear before we do the pre-upgrade check.
So in 3.10, you could still have users with the
same. Here's a really interesting thing. In 3.9 and 0.7, I think, or 0.17, whatever it was, they introduced this non-duplicating index function by updating the table, and it skipped that and carried on with the rest of the upgrade and said, "Oh, you've upgraded fine, but you've got this error to deal with." Because it couldn't apply the index to the table because there were already duplicated email addresses pre-existing. So for the past few upgrades, minor upgrades, and 3.10, it basically let it pass even and said that it was updated. It was updating all the files and versions and everything except for this database thing with a couple of extra fields and indexes and stuff like that.
We have a copy of it.
Yeah,
we could probably share with you, Patrick, if you wanted to run the test yourself. To see.
Well, it's more.
Yeah.
It's more how to explain it to the German guy that will be the one that will fix it. So, because it's because even though it sounds like that non-duplicate index being added at some point was there, I always thought that Joomla prevented you using the same. So the code would stop you creating a user that had the same email address, but the database didn't.
Yeah, is that, Stuart, because they're not creating them on the site, they're actually importing from Xplan?
That's correct. So here's the actual I'll just post this in the chat.
The scenario. Yeah.
I'll just post the resulting error message that I found when I picked up these errors. So basically, it says that it should be at 3.9.10, but actually, sorry, it said the database schema doesn't match what it thinks it should have. And these 6 tables have these errors. And they were all a result of that it tripped on this first error and then didn't complete the SQL updates that were included in those minor updates.
Yeah, right.
And then just resulted in the $500 big error in the upgrade and then no access to anything. So quick unscrambling and putting in the debug to true on your config file and your error messaging to maximum, so you could at least see what the problem was.
Yeah. So as soon as we restored the database back to 3.x, went in, ran the fix, fixed the actual source of the errors, isolated them, fixed them, ran the fix. It updated this. Rolled all those forward, and then the upgrade went like clockwork.
Yeah.
But my issue is that, one, it was a problem that I wasn't aware of, but it should have been picked up in the pre-upgrade check before. It should have said, you've got these errors you need to address before we can actually roll forward.
So it's less the issue that because if you manage to get duplicate email addresses, then it's going to fail because of the change to the database table.
Correct.
Regardless. So then, until you fix that, you can't get to Joomla 4 working properly.
Correct.
So it's better to put it in the pre-check.
Yeah, there was no feedback from me when I started the process. I mean, I did the updating and the uninstalling of irrelevant stuff before, but no reference whatsoever to that database issue. And so I proceeded, and I ran the whole process several times because I thought I must be missing something.
There's nothing more than the Germans like than me disappearing for most of the last 6 months, and then suddenly popping up with, "Hey, go fix this."
Yeah, but I ran it several times just to make sure that I hadn't missed something, and then it was like, oh.
No, that's all right. So, all right, made some notes on that one.
Yeah.
So, cool.
But we figured we might as well start trying some of these bigger sites, because otherwise, we're all sitting around going like, is it time? So it was, some of us, we just have to do it. See what happens. But yeah.
Cool. I'll come. Well, yeah. You've got it around it now, so it's no longer an issue for you. But yeah, it'll be an issue for someone else down the track, I'm sure. So
absolutely, yeah.
I've thrown a question in the chat there. I've got a client that's got a Shopify site for one part of their business, and then we've just launched their Joomla-based J2 store solution, and they, of course, didn't have this in the initial scope, but now want it. They use a service on Shopify called Judge Me, which lets them trigger after-sales review requests out, and then once the review's processed on Judge Me, it then comes back and appears as a part of the widget on the page. So then it's managing their ratings and review, rich snippets and things like that. So when you look up one of their products on their Shopify site, you actually get the 5 stars or whatever and how many ratings it's got. So they want that on the Joomla side of things. So I'm just wondering whether anyone with a J2 store site specifically, but other Joomla shopping carts, has got something that does ratings. And then Judge Me has a whole API layer, and has a WooCommerce WordPress plugin. so I can download that and then try and cross-engineer it to work with Joomla, which is the current plan. But
what's the particular feature of Judge Me?
it's more that it does the ratings and reviews and go to the features list here. Is it?
I mean, most shopping carts have ratings and reviews. What's the particular differentiator?
Well, this one's collecting reviews on. Does you aggregates your Google and Facebook reviews and things like that. So there's. I haven't found a J2 Store ratings plugin.
No.
In the very quick glance that I've gone and had for it.
Right.
I've been using a third-party product for Instagram and Facebook feeds because I've been having so much trouble with all the stuff that seems to be blocking. So Elf Site is an app site that I have been using, and it's pretty good. So maybe have a look there to see if there's something that could be utilised. It sounds like it's very specific per page though, so that's quite unique.
Yeah, and at the moment I can see partially the benefit of it in that it's off doing all of the review stuff itself. And it's designed just to do, like so many WordPress and Shopify plugins, it's designed to do that bubble in relation to a whole heap of other bubbles. But at the same time, that's something that Joomla's ecosystem hasn't stepped up to the plate on, to go and tap into all these tools and APIs for better or worse to end up with them. So, because having just spent most of the last month doing trying to get Gravity Forms to do things that should be really simple like they are in RS Forms.
Oh. Don't get me started. Terry's smiling as well over there. He's knowing my pain.
Got to final user acceptance testing today, and then as they find one mistake, I'll then do another test to fix that mistake, but then spot 3 other things that just need to be slightly adjusted and keep going backwards and forwards with them. So we're down to the point. It did end up being that the developers of the API for the system that takes the form from WordPress into the next system have actually provided an error message when you actually submit a valid response into the API saying that a field is missing, but the field's not required. So it's actually a false positive coming back. So we had to...
Yeah, it seems to handle conditional stuff appallingly, I have to say.
Yeah. It's, and then having to deal with everything by field ID number.
Yeah.
So if you drop a field and replace it with one of the same name to change the type, then you're actually going to go back in and remap that field and change all of that. So or go and find a plugin that does some of it, but that's even still not necessarily what you want. So
I've nearly convinced a body corporate I do work for that has a key ordering form for all of their properties that was built in Gravity Forms. And I've previously tried to upgrade the WordPress install that it's running on, which is like version 3.8 or something. Yeah, with a really ancient version of Gravity Forms.
Yeah.
And went through the process as you would on German stuff. It took me 16 hours, I think. And it just completely busted the form. It was like, they completely changed how the layouts work, and this old form had been, it was just, so I went back to them and said, that's not happening. However, if you'd like to rebuild it, we can look at that. So they're currently working through that. But yeah, Gravity Forms is in aptitude might have actually won me that job. So.
Yeah. So I'm after having now done. So I actually rewrote. I got this job through knowing how another job had been done, but the developer for that job had moved on to other things. So, and I know both clients were using the same system to push into the endpoint, so that's where the similarity came in. But one is using a CSV uploaded file to get the base data for the drop downs, and the second site, which is what I've worked on, had to use Ajax to pull API calls to load the data. And so as I got into plugin versus plugin, it was basically, okay, well, let's take 90% of this one and throw it in the bin, and then write 1,000 lines of code to do what we need to do and go from there. So,
but don't worry, it's the premier forms application on WordPress.
I know, as all the Instagram ads now tell me because I've been to their website now to ask questions. So yeah, it's sometimes I like to hide ads because it's now irrelevant because I've bought the product. But when it comes to WordPress ones, I'm happy to suffer through looking at the ads, knowing that it's wasting their money. So, yeah.
Snarky, but I like it.
So Martin, how are you suggesting that this Zapier IFTT could help you there? If you're still there. You stepped away from keyboard.
Yes, I had. Sorry. Hence the question mark. I don't know, but I thought it might be a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some other things that I've done with Zapier and there's IFTT. Yeah, to be honest, they asked 2 weeks ago, and I've then had a NAS fail and this other job finish up, so I'm coming back to it. But it's once I play around, I think it might be that I can do a Zap or something like that. But looking at the API, it looks like it should get to a point where it may be as simple as putting a custom field in that connects it to the Judge Me API and then just passes the product code through. And if I can do that, then yay for me. Don't need to write a plugin, just need to write up how to do it, and others can use it as well. So yeah. So follow me up later if you're interested in a comprehensive review interface that Judge Me may or may not provide. Looking at their examples to try and work out what it really does, but yeah, it's just because they provide examples doesn't mean it's the best way to go. So
I was working on an old site the other day that had RS firewall installed on it. Shame Russell's not here to defend their honour. So I was like, oh, I'm not doing anything with this. So it's like a 1.7 version. It's like 3.0 or something. And, I don't have a license for that. I was like, sod that, I'm getting rid of that and installing admin tools. So I uninstalled RS Firewall, killed the site. It literally deleted the first row of the assets table. ID 1, root.assets. Yeah. I was like, hey, what the hell's going on here?
So what
it took me longer than I just described it to work that out. 30 minutes later, I was like, huh? Something there. Okay.
So what did you do? You'd installed RS Firewall?
No, that was on the site that I was fixing or I was updating.
Yeah.
And so I just uninstalled RS Firewall. And then I got error, like the black text error on white page up in the left-hand corner of the page, just saying, database error. So then I spent a while checking all the basics and things, and eventually started having a look in the. So I noticed that there was an error in the title, and then had a look at that, and sort of gave me a hint. And so I went and had a look in the database table, and then I had to compare it. I compared it to my website and was looking for things, and eventually I looked at the assets table and went, "Oh, look at that!" And I had done this on a dev site, the dev.website.com. So not the live site, and so then I compared it with the live site's database tables. Oh yeah, we're missing.
There's one row different there.
Yeah, we're missing that row. That'd be useful, wouldn't it? That pretty much runs all the other rows.
Well, there's one row plus however many rows RS Firewall took up. That would have been the difference. So
yeah, I guess so. But I was like, yeah, that's a fairly unimpressive uninstall routine. So.
Yeah. It was an older version of RS Firewall.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a subscription to RS Firewall, so I wasn't going to upgrade it.
No.
I'm sure the latest version is fine. But
yeah, I'm just trying to think.
It was pretty old. It was probably a 2019 version, 18 maybe.
Yeah.
So, it was fun though.
Yeah, way to go, Greg. No one else is talking.
I thought Patrick was in charge.
He only thinks he's in charge.
That's the illusion.
I've got a number of cron jobs, and the way I do them is to use the HTTPS format of setting up the cron job in cPanel. And that works exactly fine. But when you look on the web for solutions for cron jobs in Joomla, you get a method that involves quite a lot of code to create a
cron command.
Well, it's more than just creating a cron command. It's writing a PHP script that I don't fully understand because of what's in there. I mean, I'm perfectly familiar with PHP, but I'm just wondering why you would do it that convoluted way. Is there something wrong with using the simple reference to a page using a HTTPS URL embedded in the cron task? Any comments on that?
You sure it wasn't for when you don't have access to cron?
Well, wouldn't everyone have access to cron through cPanel?
Oh, not necessarily. Back in the day, there used to be hosting environments where you have limited access to certainly things like cron. There's been different projects that have tried to circumvent the server level cron. I mean, Joomla 4 has got the task scheduler, which kind of does exactly that. But yeah, maybe it was one of those kind of scripts.
Yeah, that's where the Joomla 4 task scheduler came out of there needing to be a poor man's cron for where you don't have a cron system. But that's now gone far above that and now has a bunch of other features and more features coming soon that you can then granularize what you're doing with the task scheduler. So I would say that just having a look at the Kiba documentation, that there's a script halfway down one of the pages there for when what's the heading? A PHP alternative to wget, and you basically have to have a script file that you create that has all the settings in it, and then you would reference that file to get it to trigger to do something else. So depending on where you're hosted, I guess it would be whether cron works or anything else works and go from there.
Greg, in what you're looking at, the stuff you said looks complicated. That usually has a /CLI on the end of the directory structure, like the bit that you cut and paste into cron will have like a few directories /CLI. Is that correct?
It references /CLI, yes, at the top.
Yeah. So what's happening is if the ones you use with the HTTPS, usually you have CURL in front of it.
No, it's not using curl.
No, you're not using curl. Okay.
It's using a direct link to the page.
But it's still got HTTPS in it.
Yeah, it's just a URL. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's got the domain name and then something.
Well, not the domain name. It's using the /username in the format that the. Oh, hang on.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're right. It does have the domain name. Yeah.
And then something, a few parameters or a task, or it'll probably have a task or equals something in it. If you have one there in front of you, just cut and paste it into the chat. But yeah, if you use the HTTPS way, you're actually coming into the website as a front end user normally, and so you're essentially in site. Whereas the way you see there with CLI, which is command line interface, the reason they look complicated and they are a pain to work on is you're trying to build a Joomla environment, and that's what a lot of the first parts of it does, and then it runs some sort of script in the background. So when you're writing, for you to use the HTTPS way, the developer has to have written something as a part of their component for you to actually use that, and that's why you're able to do it. Whereas if you want to write something of your own and not be a part of a component, like you might want to go in and change some database tables, that's why you write your own script, stick it in the /CLI library, and then you can run it through your cron. So, and it actually isn't a front end user and it isn't an admin. It's actually another one which is actually called CLI, which has its own issues.
So you could drop the stats contents of the stats table if you wanted via cron using your own drop or script or whatever.
Yeah, you can do a lot of things with it.
Well, yeah,
Pretty much you can do whatever you want. If you write it with CLI, the only real stipulation is you've got to land it in the CLI library.
Right.
So
okay.
you'll see some plugins like prior to Joomla 4, Akiba, all their stuff was running out of a CLI, akiba.php. If you look at something like ACY Mail, it uses the front, like the HTTPS. It just runs a little bit of code that they've set up that then goes and looks to see if there's anything that needs to happen. Akiba does the same thing, it's just going in a different way. But yeah, if you wanted to go in and change a table or monitor a table, you can do it. I wrote a lot of stuff a couple of years ago that refresh databases every hour because they've got to go to some crappy little Unix system and get a import file. So yeah, so just different needs as to which one you use. And then you've got Task Scheduler, which isn't quite as great as Patrick made it out to be. It's got its own anomalies, but a few more versions and they might figure it out.
It's got a way to go, but it's so I know what else is supposed to be around the corner, and it probably needs some hand holding of some Google Summer of Code students to get to the next level. But yeah, if it's
a similar issue arises with AC mailing. If you want to use a local cron instead of using the one that they provide, the reason I wanted to discontinue theirs was that they have a restriction. You can't run it more often than 15 minutes. And I asked why this was, and I spoke at length with Igor from AC Mailing, and he said it's because they've got so many customers that they don't want to overload their server that provides the cron tasks. But I had an issue because running every 15 minutes, I had to. I was running a newsletter that went to about 3,000 people and staggered it over several hours, but it was still, to get it out in a reasonable time, it needed to upload about 120 emails every 15 minutes, or just under 500 an hour. And that caused some issues with my hosting service. They said this is too big a load if you do it in the middle of the day, especially. And so I said, well, I can upload smaller batches, but I'd have to use a local cron. So Igor gave me there's nothing on their documentation about how to implement the local cron. So he gave me the format, which is basically using one of these HTTPS cron tasks. And
I've actually always said AC Mailing up with local cron. I've never used their cron service.
Yeah.
And has actually been documentation.
Yeah, no. What happened with that is back in version 5, where we used to do all local stuff, they dropped the documentation because they want you to pay for the product. That's why they want you to go through their cron. You can only use their cron if you pay for the product. So they dropped the way to do it locally.
Oh, it's actually worse than that. No, the documentation is still there if you've paid for the license, but you can't use local cron unless you've got the enterprise license.
Okay.
It just doesn't work. So basically, they build a check into their script which does the cron stuff to basically say, if this is the enterprise version, don't run.
Is that version 6 and 7 or version 5?
No, version 6 and 7. Version 5, you can still get away with.
Yeah, that's what
So is this not a reason then for using an external mail sending service like simple email service from Amazon?
Yeah, but they come with charges and costs as well.
Tuppence halfpenny, literally. You know, it's like I think I sent 3,000 emails or I can't remember how many. It was in the low thousands, and I think the cost was like 21 cents. It's like, well, it's not even bother work. I'm not even going to bill the client for the 21 cents because it's embarrassing. I'll just include half an hour of my time.
So, Venture IP will let you send 750 emails per hour through their shared hosting. So if you're on a VPS, you can do whatever you like. 750 per hour is the max they'll do. So you can get away with 4 lots of 150. And I've done that with some, clients with large lists, but without the cash to pay for the, improved hosting, I guess.
Well, I'm with a provider that allows 1,000 emails an hour, but that's very theoretical because in practice, if you're uploading too many large batches within that hour, they can have issues with their mail servers.
Right.
At least on one instance.
It's very much a theoretical limit then, correct?
Well, it's advertised as that, but yes.
Initially, that's why I ended up with a dedicated server, was to eradicate that limit on a 48,000 list. And then more recently, a couple of 15,000 lists. I've never seen a bill over $2 or $3 on Amazon SMS, or sorry, Amazon SES for sending out to those. But and then I've got clients that are silly enough to want or think that they want MailChimp features, and so go and pay for MailChimp pricing with more than 2,000.
Yeah, no.
And so
Amazon SES is the go, is it?
Amazon SES I found performs really well, and just looking at the ACY mailing website, they've got instructions for
I was going to say it was quite difficult to get it running, wasn't it, Martin? You were bitching and moaning about it for months, man.
Well, yeah.
Wet.
The issue was that the documentation from ACY mailing. I mean, I can understand it sort of in their defence, I guess. Amazon update their stuff so frequently that you've got to be permanently updating the documentation to make sure that the process you follow is somewhat concurrent with the documentation. So I kind of get that. But the process by which you get your account qualified by Amazon was the bit that took the time. Once the account was qualified, which was, I can't remember how it was done now.
How long ago was that, Martin?
Oh, it would have been a year ago, so it would have changed since then, 1,000 times since then.
That's right. It used to be really, really cumbersome.
Yes, a manual, in fact.
Yeah, when Woodsy and I were first setting up Sendy,
yes,
about 25 things to get it all working.
Yeah, I've done a few of them, SendGrid, the Rocket one, yeah. But yeah, the Amazon one I hadn't had a go at yet. That looks pretty cheap.
It is, and if you host your application on AWS EC2, you get the first 62,000 free per month.
I'm sure you do.
Free to
yeah, but of course,
then I would have to go through the nightmare of running my site on AWS. Someone got a fork.
Yeah, exactly. No thanks. So the thing I liked about using SES was from within ACY mailing, press the button, gone. End of story. No fiddling about every 15 minutes or waiting or will they all get out. A bit like MailChimp. Press the button, away they go.
No, it was worth me showing up tonight. I have one client who I might move to that actually.
Are there ever any issues with blacklists using those kind of services?
No. So Amazon SES sends out through multiple servers. There's been occasions where one of the links will go down on a blacklist, and Amazon then just stop routing mail through that as soon as they spot it, I think. But I've never had... I've had problems with the Sendy email client tool, but not with the deliverability of the emails with Amazon SES. If you've gone through and set up all of your SPF, DMARC, domain keys, which is all part of the setup process.
They've got a team of people doing that the way other. I mean, that's what they do, kind of thing. That's their core bread and butter. So if they've got issues with it, it's costing them a squillion. So they would be on it like a flash.
I got something to ask if no one else wants to say anything. I got a client, a requirement coming up for a client where they want their logged in users to be able to take a photo of something and upload it straight away. Nice and simple. Like basically, nice and simple. Now, it's got to work with a custom application, so I'm not expecting anything off the shelf. But what would be interested if anyone knows or has seen examples of things in Joomla where uploading photos is really nice and simple and easy, and then I'll just go and pinch that idea and use it. So that's basically it. Got to make nice, simple photo uploading, and then I'll work out where I want to store it and what I want to call it.
So I've done that with the fishing tournament site that I built. So I used Fabric in that particular case, but I know that your skill set's far more diverse, and at some point I'll probably come back to you with the other problem that I've got. So we had competitors uploading from their mobile phones. Yeah. The next thing I've got to do is change the file uploader to actually so on the client side, scale the photo down to increase the speed of the upload, because today's latest iPhone and the latest Samsung, if you haven't changed your phone setting, you'll be uploading an 8 megabit.
Yeah, I've got a forum where people seem to want to upload 20 megabytes of some piece of crap.
Yeah. So I've got to get the size down, but I've also then got another one where so there's a JavaScript library called Cropper, and it's actually one of the libraries that comes with Joomla, that's used by the media manager to do some things. But what I want to do with that is get it so that I've got a file upload widget as part of the form, and when you upload your photo, it then turns Cropper on and will show you a face and get you to crop the photo in the face so that you're actually taking a live passport photo for an accreditation card.
Right.
That one's a bit more down the track on it, but we had 1,500 fish uploaded for the fishing tournament at the start of the year, and they're expecting about 2,000 because if numbers go back up next year post-COVID. So the biggest headache I've got at the moment is that I need to do a client-side resize before it pushes it up, because with the fishing event up in Ngambie, the internet's not flash. So.
Yeah, that's flash in Ngambie. The product out of New Zealand, Ignite Gallery, I used that a few years ago. It uses some sort of, or I looked at it a few years ago and haven't looked at it lately, but it was using something called PULP uploader.
Right.
And what it does all that resizing and everything before it actually does the upload. So I was going to go back and revisit that and see whether that might solve that side of the problem that you've got with wanting to sort it out before you upload it. But I was just curious to see if anyone had seen knife interfaces that just in any other products that made uploading photos nice and easy for the end user. So anyway, if anyone thinks of an example, just let me know.
Was one that I don't know from an end user perspective, but it was certainly very easy. That was that event gallery. Basically, you could load the images up to an Amazon bucket or some other cheap storage, and it would then run a process to resize all the different sized images off that one source image. And I think it had a user upload function as well, so it might be worth having a bit more of a look. I've got a copy of it somewhere, so
What was it called? Event Gallery?
Event Gallery, yeah.
Okay. Is that like the same as event booking, OS Solutions or Joom Donation? Or?
No, it was completely misnamed for what it is. But basically, I'll find the example. I'm just trying to remember where I used it.
I'm curious about Patrick's story about the fish. Is the cropper looking for a face?
Well, no, so the cropper won't be used for the fish one.
Right.
Looking at plot up or PL upload that Terry's just pointed out, that's more than likely going to solve the problem that I've got with the fish. The photo one is more for accreditation systems where we've got to put photo ID onto cards. And up until now, it might be 1,500 people that are accredited for the event, and the few days before we print, I download the 1,500 photos, crop them, resize them, then push them back up onto the server with the same file names to get around that one. And over the years, that's been quite amusing when, in Australia, if you are asked for a passport photo, we all know what we're going to be providing. But in some of the other countries have used this system on they were supplying. I think the funniest one was a girl that was beachside in a bikini with her pet dog beside her side. So we had to crop the dog out and crop her face. So I think we saved a copy of the original photo and then cropped the dog out and put that on a different accreditation just for fun. So
I love the PL upload website under documentation. It says documentation is much better now than before. It does look cool though.
of course, I've got to just work out how to more programming there to to know what it's doing.
I think Fokker Gallery might use this system as well.
Yeah,
actually.
right. Actually, looking at the JS Fiddle demos that they've got, you just start by putting in all your parameters into the jQuery call, and then off it goes. So.
Yeah, it just seemed to, when I looked at it, and I didn't know much about JavaScript back then, I could just see that it just did all the work on the client rather than on the server after it had uploaded. So it just looked like a nice way of doing it if you could get it to fit on Joomla.
I think the end goal with the tournament is that this year will be the 4th year of the event and the 3rd year that they've used my system. And the ideal scenario is that it gets to a point where I have to go up there for the 4 days at my day rate and effectively can base myself at the bar instead of the information tent and know that they just need to ping me when someone comes back and can't quite do something. Although we did have cleaner feeling phones this year. We had a couple of cases last year where we had to grab the Fisho's phone and try and submit the photo for them on our Wi-Fi. And the last thing that they had open in their browser wasn't something that we really wanted to be touching the phone for. But what can you do? So,
Fishtails.
Yeah. What else I put out in the... I was going to open it up to Mick to say something about whether
He's gone.
he'd be gone. Yeah, so.
NASDAQ exchange update.
I have been finding lots of answers about my WordPress problems in Stack Exchange, and about gravity forms in Stack Exchange and PHP and JavaScript errors and things like that. But not finding. Oh yeah, I know.
I have a good story from agency land this week, where I saved one of my clients $5,000, literally, because Zane are doing this new support service that's all run through Salesforce. But Salesforce is not something that I have skills in, and it's a pretty specialist area. So I said, take your massive Salesforce project and go and find some Salesforce consultants and get them to build it for you. Thanks very much. Which they did. That was great. And then the agency which did that, let's call them Maverick, because that's their name, got asked recently to integrate Google Tag Manager with the Salesforce Lightning Experience cloud platform that they built this portal through. And it was a bit of a question of how many people does it take to change a light bulb? Because the quote was for a half day for the account manager, a half day for a technical lead, and then 2 full days for a senior developer to complete the integration.
And so that was just to copy the
So that was 5,500, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, look, there was a little bit of adjustment of the CSP policies, the content security policies inside Salesforce that had to be entered. But if you followed the fairly detailed guideline document on the Salesforce developer website, as I did, you could comfortably complete it in about 3 hours on your own.
Yeah.
So the IT manager there had sent me their quote and said, just could you have a look at this and see if it seems reasonable to you? And I'm, oh, yeah. Nah, not so much. I said, oh, look, how about you give me a crack at it and I'll see what I can do for you.
And 3 hours later, or probably less?
Yeah, 2.5. I'm going to bill them 4 just because it was like 5.5 grand. So, you know.
Yeah. If they, unfortunately, they were entertaining spending 5 grand on it. So,
yeah, they can pay me 4 hours when it took me 2.5. But anyway,
yeah.
Probably 3 if I throw in a little bit of, you know, there was a call, there was a chat. Yeah.
Yes, and it took you at least a half an hour to pick your jaw up when you saw it was 5,000.
There is that. I just thought, how many people does it take to install Google Tag Manager? Not that many.
I love the idea that they need to get the account manager in on it.
I know, right? Like, what the are they doing? I'm like, all right, we're going to have a meeting. We've got the senior developer here. We've got the technical lead. They're going to have a look at things. There you go. There's a bill for 4 hours.
That's right. Can someone show me the 5 lines of code we need to add in? Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
Wild it was.
That's all right. On Saturday, we went to a Telstra store at North Lakes on the north side of Brisbane on our way back from the Sunshine Coast to buy a Wi-Fi dongle, you know, one of the Wi-Fi hotspots.
Yeah.
Do you have an appointment?
Yeah.
We're booked out today. I just want to buy seriously, that's what she said. We are booked out today. If you don't have an appointment, we can't help you. So we went to another Telstra shop where we could just walk in. They don't take appointments. But how ridiculous, $139 device, you have to make an appointment to see when you know that that's what you want. Do you have any stock? Yes, I'll take one now. Thanks very much for coming.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Ridiculous.
That's crazy.
It'll be interesting to see what, because they are doing that big push that Telstra's now, home-based or Australian-based support, and I'm sort of,
Mate, you're doing websites and running social media, according to the ad I saw last night.
Yeah, I'm watching the ads and I'm just going. I wouldn't go to Telstra to do that. I wouldn't go to Telstra.
No, but people will.
Yeah, people will, but and then they'll have a conversation with someone else at some point and refer through to one of us. Don't you get today, Stuart?
I saw the ad last night and I loved the shot of the young designer sitting at her desk having a coffee who was going to be designing their website. I was just like, oh, give me a spell. Yeah. Someone in a sweatshop in Bangladesh, surely.
Correct.
In a former existence, I used to do usability customer experience testing of some of their digital solutions for customers to assemble themselves at home.
Oh, really? Lordy. I'm getting that you gave a lot of positive feedback then.
It warranted a very big job. Anyway, needless to say, I didn't stay for very long. But anyway, just schmozzle,
I saw that last night. They were saying they're going to build their website for you, design it, and run your social media for you. They've got these 2 young kids who are going to do it. And I was like, well, that's until they get bored because they saw something on TikTok and they run off to watch that instead.
You're sounding like an old man there, Nathan, I've got to say.
I am an old man, Martin, and happily wearing it. This grey hair isn't fucking it isn't dyed.
It's just called blonde, isn't it?
Yeah. Ash.
Silver.
Apparently, it's the colour all the cool kids are dyeing their hair these days.
Mm.
Don't listen to everything your hairdresser says.
I haven't actually been to see her for 3 years, mate. So, Anne-Marie,
As you have seen, neither have I.
Anne-Marie does my hair now. So.
Mm.
All right, folks. Well, I'm gonna
I'm gonna
clock off. Good to see you all.
Mm.
Yes.
And see you next time.
We'll see you next time.
People.
Adios.
Bye.
Bye.
Mhm.